Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today we're revisiting one of the most scrutinized evenings in modern criminal history by reconstructing, minute by minute, the timeline of the night Madeleine McCann disappeared.
And, it is quite a timeline to unpack.
It really is.
Yeah.
And whenever we sit down to walk through one of these chronologies, I'm just constantly struck by the sheer psychological weight of it all. Because in your normal everyday life, a 30-minute window means absolutely nothing.
Right. It's completely invisible.
Exactly. I mean, think about it for a second. If a detective knocked on your door right now and asked you exactly what you were doing last Tuesday between, say, 8:30 and 9 p.m., you would probably just stare at them.
You'd have no idea.
None. Maybe you were scrolling on your phone, or maybe you took a long shower. Maybe you're just standing in the kitchen staring blankly into the fridge. It's completely inconsequential.
It just evaporates entirely. I mean, human memory simply isn't designed to log the mundane, everyday passage of time in these neat 30-minute intervals. We remember massive disruptions, We remember heightened emotions, accidents, sudden changes in our environment. But we do not organically record the blank spaces in between our daily routines.
Right. But what happens when you introduce a crime into that routine? You introduce an event so catastrophic that suddenly those blank spaces aren't just empty air anymore.
They become critical.
Yeah, in a criminal investigation, a single unaccounted minute can become a black hole. And in the case we are exploring today, those few missing minutes have literally swallowed almost 2 decades of international police work.
Absolutely swallowed it.
We are talking about millions of pounds, countless contradictory theories, and thousands of pages of case files, all desperately trying to fill in a 30-minute gap on a warm May evening.
Which brings us to the core mission of our exploration today, because we are not just here to recite a chronological list of events for you.
No, not at all.
We want to examine exactly why the sequence of events from May 3rd, 2007 remains the ultimate battleground for the truth. We really have to ask ourselves, and you, the listener, can the answers to an 18-year-old mystery still be found by looking closer at the original chronological sequence?
Or has the timeline itself become so distorted over the years by trauma, memory decay, and just relentless media speculation that it's no longer a reliable map to the truth?
It's a massive question.
It really is. And to answer it, we need to set the scene precisely. We have to transport ourselves to Thursday, May 3rd, 2007.
Okay.
The location is Praia da Luz, a beautiful, idyllic village in the Algarve region of southern Portugal. The McCann family, so Kate and Jerry McCann, their 3-year-old daughter Madeline, and their 2-year-old twins, Sean and Amelie, they're on a holiday with a group of friends.
Right, the top of 7.
Exactly. They are staying at the Ocean Club Resort. Specifically, they are residing in the ground floor apartment 5A, which is located on the street called Rua Dr. Agostinho da Silva.
And visualizing the physical geography of apartment 5A is absolutely critical here.
Oh, totally, because the layout really matters.
It does, because the architecture of that specific unit dictates so much of what happens later that evening. Like you said, it is a ground floor apartment. The front of the unit, which is the non-resort side, faces the public street.
Right.
The side of the apartment features a set of steps leading directly up from another public road, Rua Dr. Francisco Gentil Martins, straight onto the patio area and to the patio doors.
So it's very exposed.
Extremely. Madeline's bedroom is situated at the front of the apartment, meaning her window directly faces that street, separated only by a low boundary wall. It was highly accessible, not tucked deep inside a secure gated compound at all.
And to understand the chaos of the evening, we first have to establish the baseline of the daytime routine, right?
We do.
Because the daytime timeline is crucial. It establishes normalcy. It grounds the narrative in reality before the nightmare begins. So at 12:30 p.m., the family has lunch together. Then at 2:29 p.m., a photograph is taken.
The famous pool photo.
Yeah. It's a picture of Madeline and Jerry sitting together by the resort pool. And to anyone looking at it, it's just a standard holiday photo.
But to an investigator, that photograph is an absolute goldmine.
Why is that?
Because in an ocean of subjective human memory, a digital photograph contains EXIF data. That's objective, unalterable timestamps.
Oh, right. It locks the time in.
Exactly. That 2:29 p.m. photo is one of the very last confirmed objective pieces of evidence definitively placing Madeline alive and well at the resort during the day.
Wow.
Following that, at 5:30 p.m., Madeline is signed out of the resort's mini club, which is the on-site child care center.
Okay, so she is back with her parents. And then at 6:30 p.m., a family friend named David Payne visits the McCann's apartment.
Right.
He is part of that larger group they are holidaying with, the group the British media would later dub the Tapas Seven. During this brief drop-in visit, David Payne sees Madeline. Now, I want to pause here for a second.
Sorry.
Why is a friend popping his head in the door treated as such a monumental marker in the case files? And it seems so minor.
Well, it's the concept of independent verification.
Okay.
Up until this point in the late afternoon, the only people who can place Madeline in that apartment are Kate and Jerry.
I see.
From a purely investigative standpoint, that 6:30 p.m. sighting by David Payne anchors the evening timeline. It provides a third-party confirmation that the child was present, alive, and seemingly fine just hours before the disappearance.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, whatever happened to Madeleine McCann, the window of opportunity for an abduction or an accident officially begins after that specific moment. It sets the stage for the evening routine.
So let's walk through the mechanics of that routine.
Yeah.
The arrangement the group has made for dinner is that the adults will all eat together at the resort's tapas restaurant.
Right.
Now, this restaurant is incredibly close to apartment 5A. We're talking 55 meters away. That is about 180 feet. You could casually walk that distance in under a minute.
Very close.
The adults put their children to bed in their respective apartments, and at 8:30 p.m., Kate and Jerry arrive at the tapas restaurant to join their friends.
And the strategy agreed upon by the group is that rather than hiring local babysitters, they will conduct periodic physical checks on the children themselves.
Right.
They plan to take turns leaving the dining table every 20 to 30 minutes, walking the short distance back to the apartments, and basically ensuring everything is secure.
Which brings us to the first official check of the evening. At 9:05 p.m., Jerry McCann leaves the dinner table and walks the 55 meters back to apartment 5A.
The 9:05 check.
Yeah. He unlocks the door and enters the apartment. According to his official police statement, he goes to the children's bedroom. He opens the door, looks in, and sees Madeline asleep in her bed.
Right.
He later mentions feeling a distinct moment of pride as a father, just taking a moment to look at her. He then pulls the bedroom door to, leaving it slightly ajar as it had been, and leaves the apartment.
But there's a complication on his way back.
Yes, there is. On his way back to the restaurant, he bumps into a man named Jeremy Wilkins, another resort guest who is out walking. They stand outside the apartment, chatting for a few minutes.
And that interaction with Jeremy Wilkins is a double-edged sword for the timeline.
How so?
Well, on one hand, it provides a crucial corroborating witness. Wilkins can legally attest that Jerry McCann was exactly where he said he was at that specific time.
Right, an alibi.
Exactly. However, it also introduces a block of time where Jerry is standing outside the apartment, physically exposed and potentially visible to the street. If we are operating under the theory of a watching predator, this is the exact moment an abductor would realize the father had just completed a check and was now occupied in conversation, creating an immediate window of vulnerability.
Yeah. Okay. So Jerry finishes his conversation and gets back to the table. The dinner continues, the wine is flowing, the friends are talking. Then we hit 9:30 p.m.
The critical check.
Yeah. This is the check that I always think of as the Schrodinger's cat of this entire evening.
Yeah.
Matthew Oldfield, one of the friends in the Tapas Seven, offers to go do the checks.
Right.
He walks over, checks on his own children in their apartment, and then he goes to apartment 5A to check on the McCann children on behalf of Kate and Jerry.
And this specific moment is where the inherent limitations of human perception crash headfirst into the rigorous demands of a criminal investigation.
It really is.
Matthew Oldfield steps into the quiet apartment. He walks down the short hallway to the bedroom door, but he does not go all the way into the room.
Right. And we really need to put you, the listener, in his shoes here to understand why.
Exactly.
Because of the angle of the bedroom door and the way the room is physically laid out, from where he is standing in the doorway, he can only visually confirm that the twins, Sean and Emily, are in their travel cots.
Right. They are in his line of sight.
Madeline's bed, though, is tucked away in a corner that he cannot fully see from that specific hallway angle.
He just can't see it.
No. He stands there, he listens, he hears absolutely nothing unusual. There's no noise, no crying, no signs of distress. The apartment is completely silent.
So he makes an assumption.
Yes, a completely logical, rational assumption for any parent on a quiet holiday that all three children are sound asleep. He turns around and leaves without actually laying eyes on Madeline.
And if we connect this to the broader mechanics of the timeline, that 9:30 p.m. check is the devastating turning point of the entire mystery.
It really breaks the timeline open, doesn't it?
It does. Because Oldfield did not achieve visual confirmation, the investigation is left staring into a massive, unsolvable question mark.
Yeah.
Was she already gone at 9:30 p.m.? Or was she still sleeping peacefully in that unseen corner of the room?
We just don't know.
Exactly. It instantly stretches the window of opportunity for an abductor from a tight 25-minute gap to potentially a full 55-minute chasm.
It is agonizing to think about how different things might be if he had just taken 2 steps further into the room, but he didn't. And that leads us to the final check. 10 o'clock p.m., Kate McCann leaves the restaurant to check on the kids.
Right.
She enters the apartment, she walks down the hall, she goes into the bedroom, and the world absolutely stops. She discovers Madeline is missing.
But it's not just an empty bed, is it?
No, it's not just an empty bed that she finds. The window, which faces that public street we talked about, is open. The exterior shutter is raised.
Right.
She realizes immediately this is not a case of a toddler wandering out of bed to find her parents. She runs back to the topless restaurant, completely panicked, screaming, "They've taken her!"
And in that exact fraction of a second, the timeline fractures. We violently transition from a predictable, documented evening routine into total, unmitigated chaos.
Chaos is the right word.
But before we get to the immediate aftermath and the search, we really have to layer in the external witness sightings.
Okay, let's do that.
Because while the adults were eating and checking, other people were moving around the resort, and their observations completely complicate the narrative.
Yes, the external sightings. This is where the timeline gets incredibly murky. Let's rewind the clock slightly to 9:15 p.m.
Okay, back to 9:15.
Jane Tanner, one of the friends at the tapas table, leaves the restaurant to go check on her own children. On her way back, she crosses the top of the street that intersects with McCann's apartment.
Right.
She reports seeing a man carrying a sleeping child walking purposefully away from the resort area.
And for years, the Jane Tanner sighting was the absolute focal point of the entire international investigation.
It was huge.
It was the bedrock of the primary abduction theory. The sketch generated from the description she provided was disseminated on front pages globally.
I remember seeing it everywhere.
But what is fascinating from a forensic standpoint and deeply frustrating for the investigators who spent years chasing it is how perceived evidence can evolve and ultimately collapse.
Yeah.
Years later, after an exhaustive review of every single resort guest and their movements, this sighting was largely dismissed.
Wait, how does a star witness sighting, a sighting that defined a global manhunt, just get dismissed?
Through sheer, painstaking elimination, another British guest came forward.
Really?
Yeah, a man who had been carrying his own child back from the resort's night krish at that exact time, walking that exact route, wearing clothes that perfectly matched Tanner's description.
Oh, wow.
The timing aligned perfectly. It was a tragic case of mistaken identity based on a fleeting glance in low light.
So the timeline's biggest structural pillar just crumbles to dust.
Exactly.
But that leaves investigators with the second major sighting. At 9:50 p.m., an independent group of witnesses, the Smith family, who are visiting from Ireland and are completely unconnected to the McCanns, the Tapas 7, or the resort itself, they're walking toward their own accommodation.
Right.
They're about 500 yards away from the McCann's apartment. They report seeing a man carrying a blonde child walking down a hill away from the Ocean Club, heading toward the beach area.
And this raises a critical shifting dynamic in the investigation.
How so?
Well, if the Jane Tanner sighting at 9:15 p.m. is a red herring, the Smith family sighting at 9:50 p.m. becomes the single most critical, uncorroborated piece of external evidence.
Because it's so close to 10 p.m.
Yes. It radically shifts the timeline. It suggests that the abduction did not happen early in the evening, but rather very close to the 10 o'clock p.m. discovery.
Right.
Potentially during that critical unguarded window after Matthew Oldfield's incomplete auditory check at 9:30 p.m.
Okay, let's move into what happens right after Kate's scream at 10 o'clock p.m., the immediate aftermath.
It's a mess.
Now, when we talk about a major crime scene on this show, we usually use the analogy of a blank canvas, right?
We do.
The forensic teams arrive in their suits, they dust for prints, they use alternate light sources to look for fibers, they swab for touch DNA. They are essentially trying to find the absolute faintest brushstrokes left behind by the perpetrator. But I have to ask you, what happens to that pristine canvas when dozens of panicked, terrified people trample all over it for hours before the forensic experts even put their gloves on?
It ceases to be a canvas entirely. It becomes a mudslide.
A mudslide.
And that, tragically, is exactly what happened inside apartment 5A. We have to understand the mechanism of Locard's exchange principle.
That's the foundational rule of forensics.
Exactly, which states that every contact leaves a trace. When an intruder enters a room, they leave microscopic evidence: sweat, skin cells, clothing fibers, soil from their shoes, and they take microscopic evidence away with them.
But the source material shows that in those chaotic early hours, the Portuguese police entirely failed to secure the apartment.
Complete failure.
It wasn't taped off. The perimeter wasn't established. Staff from the Ocean Club, other resort guests, the friends from the Top of Seven, the family themselves, everyone was moving frantically in and out of the apartment, desperately searching under beds, opening cupboards, checking the windows.
And that desperation, while completely human and understandable, resulted in the contamination of the scene, which stands as one of the most severe operational failures in this case.
Because they're destroying the evidence.
Yes. When you have multiple unauthorized people touching doors, pacing on the floors, interacting with the bedding, and handling the window shutters, you are actively destroying the physical timeline.
Wow.
Any microscopic evidence left by an intruder, a scuff mark from a rubber sole, a stray synthetic fiber from a jacket, a partial fingerprint on the window frame is instantly overwritten or obliterated by the searchers.
That is so frustrating.
By the time specialized forensic units finally arrive to process the scene, it is nearly impossible to untangle the victim's physical timeline from the rescuer's physical timeline.
Yeah.
Furthermore, specialist search dogs were not brought in until days later, completely missing that crucial early window when scent trails in the air and on the ground are at their absolute strongest.
And as the physical evidence fails to yield quick answers, as that canvas turns to mud, the official investigation takes a massive, highly controversial detour.
It does.
Now, I want to be very careful here and make it absolutely clear to you, the listener, we are simply looking at the historical evolution of the official police timeline.
Right.
We are not taking sides, we are not endorsing the theories of the time, and we are certainly not making accusations. We're just impartially following the path the police walked.
Exactly.
And the path they walked first led directly to a man named Robert Murat. He was an Anglo-Portuguese property developer who happened to live just 100 yards away from the Ocean Club.
Very close.
On May 14th, just 11 days after the disappearance, he is officially made an arguido.
Arguido is a specific Portuguese legal classification that translates roughly to formal suspect or named suspect.
Okay.
It is a status that grants the individual certain legal protections, such as the right to remain silent and the right to have a lawyer present during questioning. But it also signals a profound shift in police focus. The investigation poured immense manpower and resources into Murat. His home was extensively searched, his property was excavated, and his life was turned entirely upside down.
But they found nothing.
Nothing. By July 2008, he was completely cleared of any involvement and received substantial damages from various media outlets. The timeline had led investigators down a total blind alley.
But the arguido status didn't end with Murat. Things took a much darker, much more complicated turn later that summer.
Yes, they did.
In August 2007, British sniffer dogs are flown into Portugal. Specifically, two highly trained dogs. Eddie, an English Springer Spaniel trained to detect the scent of human cadavers, and Keela, trained to detect human blood.
Right.
These dogs are taken through apartment 5A, and they both alert to scents inside the apartment.
And crucially, they also alert to scents inside a Renault Scenic hire car.
But here's the massive, almost incomprehensible timeline complication.
Sure.
The McCanns rented that specific car 25 days after Madeline disappeared.
That's right.
Okay, I have to push back here. How does that science even work? How does a dog alert to the scent of a missing person in a car that wasn't even in the family's possession until nearly a month after she vanished? Is that even forensically sound?
It requires an understanding of how canine olfaction and volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, interact.
Okay, break that down for me.
When a human body expires, it immediately begins releasing specific chemical markers. Cadaver dogs like Eddie are trained to detect these specific VOCs.
Right.
The scientific theory is that scent can transfer. If an item, clothing, a toy, luggage comes into contact with cadaver scent, it can absorb those VOCs.
Oh, I see.
If that item is later placed in the trunk of a rental car, the scent transfers to the car's interior fabric, and the dog can theoretically detect it weeks later.
But surely a dog barking at a car trunk isn't enough to prove a timeline of events, right?
Yeah.
If the science is so foolproof, why aren't dog alerts admissible in court without a physical body?
That is the exact debate that tore the investigation apart. While the dogs are incredibly sensitive instruments, their alerts are subjective. They can yield false positives. They can alert to cross-contamination from other sources.
That makes sense.
In the UK legal system, and eventually in the Portuguese system, a dog's alert is considered an investigative tool, an indicator of where to look, but it is not classified as definitive evidentiary proof of death without corroborating physical evidence like a body or substantial blood pooling.
But the Portuguese police at the time felt it was enough. Based largely on these dog alerts, on September 7th, Portuguese police make Kate and Jerry McCann arguidos.
Unbelievable, Chef.
They become formal suspects in the disappearance of their own daughter. The prevailing police theory at that exact moment shifts radically. They abandon the abduction timeline and begin to suspect Madeline died in a tragic accident in the apartment on the evening of May 3rd, and the parents orchestrated a cover-up. 2 days later, on September 9th, Kate and Jerry fly back to the UK with their twins. It isn't until July 2008, the exact same time Murad is cleared, that the Portuguese Attorney General shelves the investigation entirely and lifts the arguido status from the McCanns, citing a complete and total lack of evidence to support the theory.
And it is vital to understand the devastating impact of this specific detour on the broader timeline.
So much time was lost.
Months. For months, the primary investigative energy, the media focus, and the forensic resources were directed entirely inward on the parents rather than outward, hunting a potential abductor.
Wow.
When the official investigation stalls like this, when it hits a brick wall and is formally archived in 2008, it creates a massive vacuum of truth.
And we all know exactly what happens in the modern era when there is a vacuum of truth. The internet steps in to fill it.
Always.
I want to shift our focus here because the cultural phenomenon surrounding this case is just as complex and, frankly, just as influential as the physical timeline. When official channels go quiet, online sleuths, massive Reddit communities, and true crime documentary makers take the wheel.
Right.
And they have been driving this narrative for years.
It is the absolute power of the vacuum. When the public is presented with a profound mystery that lacks a definitive ending, human nature demands a resolution.
Yeah, we hate loose ends.
Exactly. Our brains are hardwired to find patterns. So people begin to crowdsource the investigation. They dissect every available police statement. They analyze every frame of news footage. They scrutinize every photograph, trying to force the puzzle pieces to fit together.
To understand the discourse, we have to look at the two main schools of thought that emerged online to fill this vacuum. The first is the mainstream theory, which largely aligns with the initial police focus and the later UK investigations. The opportunistic offender versus stranger abduction.
Under this theory, the timeline is viewed entirely through the lens of a calculating predator.
Okay. The argument posits that an offender was actively watching the Ocean Club resort. They observed the highly predictable routine of the Tapas 7 group.
Because they left every half hour.
Exactly. They saw that the adults were leaving the restaurant every 20 to 30 minutes, like clockwork. They noted the layout of apartment 5A, the fact that it was a ground floor unit, easily accessible from the side street, partially obscured by a boundary wall with a street-facing window.
So the perpetrator just waits in the shadows and exploits that brief documented window.
Yes.
They wait for Jerry to finish his 9:05 p.m. check. They watch him get distracted talking to Jeremy Wilkins on the street. They wait for Matthew Oldfield to do his incomplete visual-only check at 9:30 p.m., and then they strike before Kate's 10 o'clock p.m. check.
It is terrifyingly plausible when you look at how geographically and temporally vulnerable this setup actually was.
It is highly plausible.
Yeah.
But what is truly fascinating here is how the internet has cultivated a completely alternate narrative.
Right. Because when you introduce hundreds of thousands of amateur sleuths to a timeline heavily populated with human error, differing perspectives, and inconsistent statements, they don't see natural human failing.
No, they don't.
They see a puzzle to be solved. And very often, they see deception.
This brings us to the timeline discrepancy theory.
Yes.
If you go on message boards and dedicated true crime forums, the discourse is intense. And again, to you listening, we are just imparting the source material on these cultural interpretations. We are not endorsing them.
Right. Neutrally exploring.
We are neutrally exploring how the public digests these timelines. The internet skeptics zero in aggressively on the discrepancies in the witness statements from the top of 7.
They look closely at the fact that later on the night of the disappearance, after the police had arrived, the group actually sat down together with a children's activity book and wrote out a chronological timeline of the evening's events, trying to synchronize their memories for the authorities.
Which I have to admit, from one perspective, sounds like a completely logical, rational response to an unfolding trauma.
Right. Your friend's child is missing, the police arrive, and need to know exactly who was where and exactly when they were there. So you grab a piece of paper and write it down to make sure you get the facts straight.
But to the internet sleuth, this action is viewed through a deeply suspicious lens.
Of course.
They view it as too calm. They view it as calculated. They see it not as memory retrieval, but as a group actively coordinating an alibi.
And this intense skepticism gave birth to the accidental death theory that has been massively crowdsourced online.
Yes.
This alternate internet timeline completely upends the official narrative. It posits that the true tragedy did not happen during the dinner checks at 10 p.m. It hypothesizes that a fatal accident occurred much earlier in the evening, perhaps between 5:30 p.m. when Madeline was picked up from the mini club and 6:30 p.m.
Right. In this deeply speculative timeline, when David Payne visits at 6:30 p.m., it isn't a routine check by a family friend. The internet theorizes this was the exact moment a cover-up was coordinated among the adults. They suggest the accident had already occurred, and the body was hidden before the tapas dinner even began.
Under this specific lens, the entire evening at the tapas restaurant is viewed as elaborate staging.
Everything is theater.
Every subsequent action is scrutinized as theater. Jerry's 9:05 p.m. check is analyzed not as a father looking in on his sleeping child, but as a deliberate absence from the table to manage the situation.
Right. Skeptics online point out that some timeline calculations suggest he was away from the table for 30 to 45 minutes during that check, which they argue is enough time to relocate a body.
And then they look at Jane Tanner's 9:15 p.m. sighting.
Ah, yes.
If the abduction theory is a lie, they argue, then Tanner's sighting of a man carrying a child is a fabricated story, planted specifically to build the abduction narrative and point the police away from the resort.
It all connects for them.
And this all climaxes with Kate's 10 p.m. alarm. Skeptics question why she would be so immediately certain of an abduction, running back and screaming, "They've taken her!" Especially considering her husband had supposedly just checked on them less than an hour prior, and the shutters could have simply been opened by the wind.
When you lay it out sequentially like that, it sounds incredibly compelling.
It
reads exactly like a movie script. It has clear motives, it has staging, it has cover-ups, and it has an ensemble cast of characters.
But I have to push back hard on this, because while internet theories sound like brilliant, tightly plotted thriller novels, the reality of human behavior is so much messier.
So much messier.
Put yourself in the parents' shoes for a second. Let's assume a fatal accident happens. You have exactly 90 minutes before you are expected at dinner. In that 90 minutes, you have to hide a body, perfectly clean all forensic evidence from the apartment, compose yourself, go to dinner, act perfectly normal, drink wine, and successfully pull off a global deception involving multiple other adults who all agree to risk their careers and freedom for you.
It's a lot.
That requires a level of criminal mastermind precision from a group of vacationing doctors that just defies logic.
You are hitting on a vital point in forensic psychology there. The internet looks for malice in calculation, where science often simply sees decay.
Decay of what?
Memory, yes. The Madeleine McCann case is now considered a primary textbook case study in the psychology of eyewitness reliability and memory contamination.
Really?
When a traumatic event occurs, the human brain is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. It does not record the environment like a high-definition video camera. It encodes fragmented sensory details.
And what happens when a group of deeply traumatized friends sit around a table for hours waiting for the police, desperately trying to figure out what just happened?
They talk to each other.
Right?
And when they talk, their timelines naturally, unconsciously bleed together. If one person says, I think I went back to the room at 9:15, another person's brain might retroactively adjust their own memory to fit that new data point in an attempt to create a cohesive narrative.
Oh, wow.
It is known as memory conformity. It is not a malicious conspiracy. It is basic neurology.
That makes total sense.
Differences in recollections, inconsistencies in police statements, these are the natural decay of memory under extreme stress. Attempting to flawlessly reconstruct historical events from human memory is notoriously scientifically flawed.
That is such an important reality check. We demand absolute robotic precision from traumatized people, and when they inevitably can't give it to us, we assume they're lying.
Exactly.
But I want to shift our focus now from the theories of the past to the hard, tangible, investigative developments of the present. Because everything we have talked about so far, the dinner checks, the sightings, the fierce arguments over the parents, all of that was completely upended in recent years by physical data.
Yes. The entire gravitational center of this investigation underwent a seismic shift in June 2020.
Enter Christian Bruckner. German police publicly identify him as the prime suspect in Madeline's disappearance. Now, who exactly is he?
Well, he is a German national, a convicted sex offender who had been living a transient, often criminal lifestyle in the Algarve region between 1995 and 2007.
Right.
This isn't just a random name pulled from a dusty database. German authorities have treated this incredibly seriously. But the specific connection that brings him into our timeline discussion today is deeply rooted in digital forensics.
The cell phone data.
Yes. Data analysis of historic telecom records showed that Christian Bruckner's cell phone pinged off a mast in the exact vicinity of the Ocean Club Resort on the evening of May 3rd, 2007.
And the specific times of that ping are what make your blood run cold, but they also completely scramble our understanding of the night. His phone was active in that specific area between 7:32 p.m. and 8:02 p.m.
Now, we need to examine the technical mechanics of that cell tower data, and then we need to apply it to the timeline. In 2007, cell phone triangulation wasn't like modern GPS.
No, it wasn't exact.
A ping off a mast in a rural Portuguese town doesn't give you a pinpoint coordinate. It gives you a sector, a radius. It proves his device connected to the network covering the Ocean Club during that half-hour window.
Exactly. I want you to look at the math with us here. Put yourself in Bruckner's shoes for a second. Your phone goes dark at 8:02 p.m.
Right.
We know definitively that Kate and Jerry McCann and the rest of the group do not leave for the tapas restaurant until 8:30 p.m. If he is the abductor, what is he doing for that half hour?
It's a huge gap.
Is he just waiting in the bushes? How does this align with the checks at 9:05 and 9:30? Does the math suggest a swift, opportunistic crime or something else entirely?
It is the critical paradox of the current investigation. If Bruckner exploited a window of opportunity, did he do it much earlier than the 10 p.m. discovery?
Right.
Could the abduction have happened in the brief window between the adults leaving for dinner at 8:30 and Jerry's first check at 9:05?
But wait, if the abduction happened before 9:05 p.m., what did Jerry see during his check? And what about Matthew Oldfield at 9:30 p.m.? Did they both check on a completely empty room without realizing it?
That is the exact nightmare scenario investigators now have to consider.
God, that's chilling.
If the hallway was dark, if Oldfield couldn't see the bed from his angle, and if Jerry only cracked the door and listened for breathing, it is horrifyingly possible that the child was already gone, and the parents were unwittingly performing routine checks on an empty room for over an hour.
Okay, beyond the cell phone data, What else actually links Bruckner to the case? Because a phone ping putting someone within a mile radius of a resort isn't enough to solve an 18-year mystery.
It's the corroborating testimony and the physical evidence found years later. In 2020, a man named Laurentius Codin, who was Bruckner's cellmate in a German prison, provided chilling testimony to authorities.
Like his cellmate.
Codin testified that Bruckner openly bragged to him about his time in Portugal.
Now, hold on.
Yeah.
I have to express some deep skepticism here. Historically, jailhouse informants are notorious for making up stories.
They are.
They read about a famous case in the newspaper, memorize a few facts, and trade a fabricated confession for a reduced sentence. Why should we trust a word Laurentius Codin says?
The skepticism is completely warranted, and defense attorneys use exactly that argument. However, prosecutors argue it is the specificity of the bragging that gives it weight.
Specificity.
According to Codin, Bruckner didn't just give a generic confession. He talked about targeting an area where rich people live. He bragged specifically about finding an open window.
Oh.
He told Codin that he broke into a house looking for money, found none, but found a child instead. Crucially, he claimed he took the child and managed to escape in his car while the area was entirely surrounded by police and dogs.
That specific detail about the police and dogs, if he is telling the truth, it implies he was still in the immediate vicinity when the alarm was raised at 10 p.m., which, again, stretches the timeline in bizarre ways. Was he hiding nearby? Did he take her earlier, stash her somewhere on the resort, and then come back for his car later? It is maddening trying to map his claims onto the established timeline.
It is very difficult to reconcile.
But the evidence against him doesn't stop with his cellmate's testimony. Let's examine the factory.
This is where the forensic timeline jumps forward a decade. In 2016, German police, utilizing a specially trained canine unit, executed a search warrant at an abandoned factory site in Germany.
Okay.
Bruckner had purchased the shuttered factory for £20,000 in 2008, approximately a year after Madeline disappeared.
And what they found buried in the dirt there is it is pure nightmare fuel. The dog sniffed out a buried wallet.
Right.
Inside that wallet were 2 memory cards and 6 USB sticks. When digital forensic investigators decrypted those hidden drives, they found horrific images of child abuse. But they also found physical items stashed at the factory. Over 75 bathing costumes, children's clothing, toys, and miniature bikes. It paints a psychological profile of a deeply disturbed, highly prolific predator who kept trophies of his presence around children.
The discovery of that encrypted drive is what gave the German prosecutors the absolute confidence to state publicly that they believe Madeline is dead.
Really?
The files allegedly contain classified evidence of his specific fascination with young girls matching Madeline's exact age group. And furthermore, satellite navigation data recovered by authorities showed that Bruckner had visited the Algarve multiple times in the years following the disappearance, suggesting a continued connection to the area.
So we have a prime suspect. We have cell phone data placing him there. We have cellmate confessions detailing an open window and police dogs. And we have buried USB drives proving a predatory history.
It looks like enough.
It feels like we are on the verge of the final chapter. But we aren't. Because finding the truth and successfully prosecuting the truth in a court of law are 2 very different things.
Very different.
We need to look at the sheer scale of the ongoing search and the international legal mess it is currently trapped inside.
The financial and operational scope of this case is completely unprecedented in modern European policing. Following a direct request from the UK Home Secretary in 2011, Scotland Yard launched Operation Grange.
Right.
This wasn't just a desk review of old files. It became a massive, active investigation. Up to the present day, Operation Grange has cost the UK taxpayer over £13 million.
13 million pounds.
Yeah.
And the physical searches haven't stopped. As recently as 2023, police conducted a massive, highly publicized dig at the Arade Dam Reservoir in Portugal.
I remember that.
And here's a crazy timeline connection that shows how evidence cycles. That specific reservoir was first searched way back in 2008, funded privately by a Portuguese lawyer who claimed criminal contacts in the underworld tipped him off.
Wow.
15 years later, based on new classified intelligence linking Bruckner to that exact area, investigators are back out there digging in the dirt again.
It perfectly demonstrates how a single geographical location can cycle in and out of relevance over decades, depending on the suspect of the day.
It really does.
But the biggest hurdle right now isn't finding physical evidence in the dirt. It is the conflicting legal perspectives between the international teams handling the case.
Right, because if you ask Scotland Yard today what the status of this case is, they will tell you it remains a missing person inquiry.
Oh.
Why? Because under their stringent legal protocols, despite everything found on Bruckner's hard drives, they do not possess definitive physical proof of death. No body has been found.
However, if you cross the border into Germany, the perspective shifts entirely. The German prosecutors, led by Christian Hopp and his team, are unequivocally treating this as a murder investigation.
A completely different classification.
Yes, they are completely confident she is dead, based on the classified evidence they hold against Bruckner. This fundamental difference in classification creates massive diplomatic and operational friction between the two agencies.
And that friction brings us to the ultimate mind-bending roadblock. Let's assume for a second that the German prosecutors have exactly what they need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Bruckner did it. Let's say Scotland Yard reviews the files and agrees.
Okay.
Bruckner is currently in the penal system. He was cleared of some unrelated rape charges in October 2024, but he has been serving time for another crime. Why can't the UK just put him on a plane to London tomorrow and put him on trial for the disappearance of Madeleine McCann?
Because of the German Constitution, specifically Article 26.
Article 26.
This is a foundational constitutional law that severely restricts the extradition of German citizens to non-EU countries. The historical context of this law dates back to post-World War II, designed to protect German citizens from being shipped off to foreign tribunals.
Oh, right.
And post-Brexit, the United Kingdom is now legally classified as a non-EU third country.
It is absolutely astounding. We spent an hour talking about the exact angle of Matthew Oldfield's vision at 9:30 p.m. We debate the validity of a dog scent in a rental car and the triangulation of a cell tower mast. We analyze every single second of the parents' dinner.
Every second.
And in the end, the thing preventing closure for this family isn't a missing piece of the physical timeline. It is a piece of paper in Berlin.
It perfectly illustrates the evolution of a cold case. The initial battle is always against time and memory. You are fighting to secure the crime scene, to interview witnesses before they forget, to find the microscopic physical trace before it washes away.
Yeah.
But as the decades pass, the battleground inevitably shifts. The enemy is no longer the decay of memory. The enemy becomes jurisdictional borders, constitutional law, and the slow grind of international bureaucracy.
So what does this all mean for us today? As we wrap up this exploration, I want you to reflect on what we have unpacked. Think about how fragile history really is.
It's incredibly fragile.
Just a few unaccounted minutes on a warm May evening in 2007. A father pulling a door to, a friend looking from the wrong angle, a moment of misplaced trust. Those tiny, mundane moments have shaped almost 2 decades of international investigation.
They really have.
They have generated millions of pounds in police work. They have ruined lives, spawned endless, vicious internet debates, and left a family in perpetual, agonizing limbo.
And that brings us to a final, rather eerie thought to mull over. We consume these mysteries, and we always think that what keeps them unsolved is a lack of evidence.
Right, the missing puzzle piece.
We think if we just had one more camera angle, one clearer footprint, one unclouded memory, we would finally have the answer.
Yeah.
But in the case of Madeleine McCann, as we sit here today, the ultimate barrier to the truth might not be a lost minute on a timeline at all. It might simply be the rigid legal text of a constitutional extradition law blocking a trial. Sometimes the truth isn't lost in the dark. Sometimes the truth is trapped by bureaucracy, not time.
It is a heavy realization. We have reconstructed the timeline as best as history allows, but the final entry has yet to be written. Next time, we return to Australia's greatest unidentified man mystery. Not to examine the body, but the mysterious code found beside him. Was it a secret intelligence message, a private love note, or simply a misunderstanding that grew into legend?